Which stream? Let's see. Turn some derps play games into a drama channel.
That would, yeah.
All right, we're coming out from behind the wall.
Okay.
Hello, welcome to some derps talk about games. I'm your co-host Mango,
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
and today we're going to talk a little bit about WoW. I guess like a 9.1 retrospective into some maybe discussion of what's coming up in 9.1.5.
Yep.
And yeah, but before we do that, we want to tell folks at home what it is we do on this podcast.
Well, on this podcast, we like to talk about games. And one of the games that we've been playing, it's kind of weird, like I feel like WoW has been a through line for me over the last like 5 years or so, right? Like we came back for Legion, and I never really stopped. But you've been off and on, right?
Yeah.
But at this point, we're almost at a year of you playing WoW, which is maybe a record, right? Like
Yeah, it's like 9 months at this point, and frankly, it's because like a lot of it's because of the social aspect. Like at this point, I'm like after we do this, I need to log in and do my Corthia stuff to hit the renown cap. But I'm just doing renown. So on my phone, I'm doing table missions because that's easy and I can farm stuff. But otherwise, I'm just logging into raid and to do the renown ups because that's the only thing left for me, I guess. I mean, I could I guess get on and like there's part of me that's like maybe I should learn how to do mythics so I can get like better gear so I can do better in raid. But then it's like that would be effort. And
yeah, and also not most, but a lot of the best gear, right? Like I'm wearing heroic raid pieces in
Lou says don't
in,
do it.
Yeah. I'm wearing heroic raid pieces in mythics because they are better, even though they're like lower item level by like 13 eye levels, right? Because they are better. So like the heroic raid this tier is much better for you than mythics are, which is different from last year, which was mythics were basically always better than the heroic Nathria, unless like you were like maybe the one trinket off of Denathrius was like better or whatever else.
Right. Just from my perspective, part of that is like maybe there's some like gaps in my gear that I could fill in because like
yeah, I mean that's the big benefit of mythics, right? There's so much gear in there that it's
yeah.
actually pretty good for filling out like weapons, right? Or rings are a huge one. Getting like properly statted rings is really easy in mythics, but it's very hard in raid just because there are less rings in the raid and more rings in mythics. But again, that's effort.
Yeah, no, I it just feels bad when I open up the raid logs and it's like 45% by class but like 87% by eye level, which I don't think is like I don't think that's I think there's some like fuzzing there because like I my bet is that my bet is that like there's less monks that are raiding at heroic that are like relatively low geared as I am, so like maybe my numbers are being goosed a little bit, but still no offense to anybody else in the raid, but it's like depressing to be like one DPS slot below somebody who's like parsing at 9%. Even though I'm like playing my heart out, but that stuff aside, we're probably not going to touch on the raid too much just because we plan on doing a full episode of that.
Yeah, we plan on doing a full. We have not gotten AOTC Sylvanas, so we're going to do a full episode on I was gonna say Castanethria, Sanctum of Domination when we clear, all the way through heroic, when we're done with heroic, right? Which is good because I have a lot to say about that raid. Um, but otherwise, like 9.1 in general, right, is been out. We've basically seen all of the content in like the patch itself. Except for, like incredibly tippy top stuff like mythic rating or, unite on PvP. I've done a couple of arenas and I am reliably informed that some stuff is stupid and broken, which has never happened in any PvP game I've ever played
Yeah,
before.
not at all. You know
That
what?
there's
You know what?
that
You know
there's
what?
a
You know what's
meta.
doubly never happened? People complaining that stuff is stupid and broken, regardless of the
Yeah,
truth value of
yeah.
those statements.
We went up against this one team that was like arcane. It was like arcane mage, priest, and like rogue or something. And as we were matching into this, I I didn't know what we were just waiting for other people to get on to do mythics. It was like me and the healer and one of the other TPS in my mythics team, and they were like, "Oh boy, we're in for it this time." And I was like, "What?" And then they proceeded to tell me that this was the super meta comp and that we were going to get dumpstered, which, by the way, we did. Which I think probably had more to do with the fact that we're walking into PvP with entirely PvE gear, right? But then there were times when we walked in and we just like completely flattened people. I think part of it is that at those low ranks, it's like bronze,
Yeah, yeah,
anything goes basically.
yeah.
But anyway, like I said, we're not PvP people. Obviously, I've been doing a lot of mythics. We've been doing a lot of raiding. We've cleared through Korthia. Have you gotten like tier 6 with the codex, the Archivist codex, and
I
everything?
haven't gotten tier 6 yet, just because that requires a lot of consistent dailies, and I just haven't
Yeah, it's
bothered.
like that's like the big grind. I completed that like last week or so, which was actually pretty satisfying, to be honest. I guess we could talk about all that stuff. So yeah, so we're going to talk about all that stuff, and then I guess preview some of the stuff that's coming up on the 9.1.5 PTR. Right, the PTR has been up for a couple of weeks now. We have a pretty good sense of all the stuff that is coming and all of the really stupid, dumb controversies that have erupted in the incredibly reasonable, outraged community of World of Warcraft.
All right, so where do you want? So I guess one of the things to start with maybe is like just Korthia, since that was the big feature of
Yeah,
9.1, right? Or the big kind of like feature that we're talking about, because the other big feature is obviously the raid. What do you think of Korthia? What do you think of Korthia as it's been implemented?
I think I really like Korthia, and it is maybe one of the best of these like a
Expansion
supplementary
zones?
zone, yeah, expansion zones that they've added. I was not like I'm thinking so in my head there are a couple of eras of WoW, right? You have sort of the classic era, which is the first three expansions, BC and Wrath. Then there's this middle era of Cataclysm, Mists of Pandaria, and Warlords of Draenor, and then Legion to me sort of represents like a new world of Warcraft, right? Where a lot of the stuff that we kind of take for granted has been like that every patch is going to have a new raid, that it's going to have this like zone or whatever else, right? And in the grand history of patch zones that we've gotten, stuff like the Timeless Isle, the Isle of Thunder, I think I like Korthia in the very top end, right? Like it's maybe my favorite or my second favorite of all of these, just for a couple of really small reasons. Number one is that the rares are interesting, which is way more important than I think I would have said if you were to have asked me 6 months ago. It's like, oh, what do you want? What do you want in a patch zone? I don't think I would have said like I want rares to have like weird spawning conditions, but I actually think that there's something really cool about the weird spawn conditions of the rares themselves, and it makes them a more engaging part of the whole Korthia experience compared to I'm specifically thinking of like Mechagon and like Nazjatar, which had a lot of these rares that were just up. They're just up all the time, and Korthia does have a few of those, but even those ones, it's like consumption will pop, but then you have to wait for him to get his stacks,
X, yeah,
and then
yeah.
he transforms into a better version of himself or whatever, right? Or it's a rare that's in the phase, and you have to shift into the void or whatever the thing is called, right? The rift in order to pull it out. And I just think that those just like little puzzle, little mini game kind of things, are just more interesting to me than the version that we got in previous eras where it's just the rare pops. It is up now, and everyone is rushing to go kill it, and it's going to be dead in 45 seconds. So get there fast, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. I also enjoy Korthia a bit. Um, I like I think I agree with you in kind of the broad strokes. It's kind of been this is my first time like really spending a lot of time with like all the other expansions. I've come in at the end and everything's obviously super accelerated, so like there's not as much to absorb. Um, but yeah, I think that the rare thing is not a thing that sticks out to me as much, but like little things like um they're not treasure goblins, but they kind of effectively act like them, like the little like
Oh, the little relic gorgers or whatever
yeah
they're
yeah
called,
yeah
right? Yeah.
yeah, little like the fact there's like a bunch of unique mounts that you can do a bunch of special stuff for, right? Like there's like the bear that you feed the mushrooms to, and the pony, and and stuff like that. Oh, and then like each faction gets their own individual one, right? Like a little bit annoying they had to like grind like that drum thing for like a bunch of days, but you know it worked. It was fun. Um, and like there's a lot of creativity I feel like in the zones, right? Like especially at the very beginning, it was like, oh, I can go like do all these like specific relic hunts, which were fun. Um,
Yeah, I loved all of those, like these little one-time quests that were all around the like, and they are these random items that have like the singing bar of steel or silver or whatever it is, right? That it just wants you to like kill guys. Or even like the little things like eventually you unlock those little swords. There are those broken swords that make a little like jump puzzle. And it's like super basic stuff. And you only do it once, but that's kind of enough, right?
yeah, yeah.
Just to kind of give Korthia a bit of I don't know, just like a bit of like life to it. Something like new to walk into.
Yeah, or like there's that chest on like the south east side that like uses the mechanics from Torghast where you like find the three keys and they change every
Yep.
day. Um
Yeah.
very annoying if you want to do it consistently, but doing it like once or twice is like, oh, that's neat. That's a nice touch.
And even
Um
doing it consistently, right? Like, at this point, I've sort of memorized the
oh, the key
locations. Like, I could
locations?
just
Yeah, yeah.
do those I could do that chest because I just know all of the places that the keys will spawn. And even that feels good, right? Like, for the first time when I'm, like, searching, when I'm like, "Huh, where the fuck is this third key? I know it's gotta be around here somewhere," right? And you eventually find it. Like, that feels good in a kind of just, like, I'm rewarded for doing the treasure hunt sense. But now when I'm doing it, it feels good because I have that experience, right? You feel that progression of getting better at something. Like something that a game designer, I think on WoW once said is that players don't, okay, this is the thing that Ian said. He says that something that players really like about a game like WoW is coming back to a place that was once hard or doing a thing that was once hard and now it is very easy, right? Which is not something like that's kind of a unique experience that only a mostly a PvE experience can give you, right? But that's not like that's not something that you're going to get out of StarCraft 2 ladder, right? Or like League of Legends ranked, right? Nobody goes back to bronze to feel like, oh, because you're constantly pushing your limits and going higher and higher. But a big part of the WoW experience is actually doing things that were, like I can solo a lot of the rares in Korthia right now, like I could go solo Croak the Tormented, for instance, like the big beefy rare
Mm,
who, you need like a whole and like that guy would have killed me the first time I went there. And part of that feels good, I
I
guess.
agree. I definitely agree
Um,
with that. Yeah, yeah. Especially when you like I feel like that's even particularly true for like the rares in the world, right? Like
yep,
that you can just kind of like style. Like I didn't do like then I don't know how it works for all the covers, but I assume it's something similar. Like there's like a spawn an extra group rare
yep,
on the conduits, and I hadn't killed one until I could solo it, and I could solo it, so easy peasy lemon squeezy. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
So I
Um,
feel like the rares have a lot to do with what I like about Korthia. I also vaguely like the dailies. My I this is
there are a
something
couple
that
of
I think
dailies that make me want to like shoot someone, and they fixed up like that critter biscuit one was like terrible, and now it's slightly better, but
Yeah, they fixed it, they changed it. I see, I like those in theory, though
yeah,
some of them piss me off. The thing that I don't like is I don't want every day to just be kill X things, right? Like, that's
yeah, yeah,
boring. But I think I want, like, the perfect version of this is 4 out of 5 of the dailies are that, and then 1 of them is a weird thing that I actually kind of have to it's like 4 out of 5 are easy, 1 of them is medium, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's like the, I don't know, like the jump puzzle one where you have to figure out where to go in the terrain to jump through the little orbs or whatever, which is like mildly, not even mildly, it's like barely skill intensive, but it is a little bit more kill intensive than just run into an area, pull everything you can,
and kill it
kill it.
all. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, because on one end, I sort of want, like when I'm doing these dailies, I'm watching a TV show, I'm listening to a podcast, you know what I mean? Like it is part of coming down, winding down after a big day at work or whatever else, right? And so filling the bar feels good for those, but also you gotta have a
A
little
little
stimulus in
spice.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little spice.
But yeah, no, I think I agree with that. But like I said, I have some very specific issues with a couple of them. Like again, that critter one, and I think there's another one that I'm forgetting.
What are some other like bad ones?
Um, off the top of my head, off the top of my head, I get like the critter one really bothered me for like because I got like did 2 days in a row, which is kind of like because like if you didn't kill the thing that attacked fast enough, the critter would run away. Just like Jesus fucking Christ, shoot me.
Well,
Um,
yeah, so what would happen was it would respond to other people. So other people would run near the critter and it would run out,
oh,
which was
I
just like a nightmare.
I also have war mode on, so like people like, and it's late enough that it's like not a huge problem. But like there was one
Yeah.
day where like I was trying to do that quest, people just like run over and like not even like kill you, right? They just like fuck with you, and that would be enough time for like the critter to run away and not to get the completion.
That sounds awesome. That sounds like the trolliest thing. Oh my god, that's funny
Yeah,
though.
no, so world PvP in Korthia actually is like super fun because it only happens once in a while at this point. But
Mhm.
like people will start like roll like it's bad if like it's just like you and like a roving horde of the opposite faction, but like you'll quickly ball up into the two factions. They'll just like I had like a really cool epic fight over consumption, like get the kill and like fighting off the alliance, and consumption is really
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that because most of the time so I war mode off almost all the time, right? So, when I'm doing consumption, a lot of the time I'm sort of like making friends on the opposite faction. It's like it's 3 in the morning. There's 2 people in Korthia. It's me and an alliance warlock, and we have to solo like the super buffed consumption or whatever, right? And that's the moment where you're kind of like making, you're making peace, not Warcraft. But I didn't think about the war mode version of that where, me and the warlock would be he could fucking kill me, right?
Yeah, no, I mean it's pretty great because like I have I occasionally have those moments, which is very rare in war mode, obviously, but like um but like consumption is particularly good for this because or bad for this depending on your perspective because the spawn point's actually fairly close to consumption, so you can like run back to your corpse relatively easily and get right back into it.
Oh,
Um,
sure. Yeah.
so you get these like great battles where it's like the fight's not that hard, but for the fact that like there's 15, there's approximately the same number of people in the opposite faction fighting you for it, and just trying to knock down the thing before you all get eliminated because if you get the kill on it, you res yourself and pick up the loot. So that's that is super fun. In terms of other dailies that I don't like that that jump through things one, I also don't think is great. Like um, mostly because part of this is maybe I should be like moving that button places, but like it's just a little too finicky for me to like really think is good. But uh,
Oh, yeah, so I have there's a keybind for that button, like, you can it has nothing by default, but you can find it in an somewhere in the keybind section, you can bind that button, so I have that key bound to something, which is useful.
yeah, I can imagine that would make sense for like because you have to do the second thing with it to like leap back. But I find
Yeah, I
that with
mean,
most
I never end up doing that, I always just leap off and then fall to where I fall and then run back up on my mount or whatever.
yeah, I mean, and so that was not so much bad as it is kind of tedious.
Sure.
And not like a a nice way, but like I think I generally agree. Oh, and like I find the one where you like jump in the mech and fight the big thing be very tedious. I don't think it's
Mhm.
supposed to be.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that one is there or the way that one works is it's supposed to be grouped up. I've done that one a couple of times with other people, and it goes really quickly, right? Because it feels like you're supposed to tackle it as a group or something like that, but it's not a group quest. You can still solo
Yeah,
it. It
yeah,
just takes like 8 gazillion years.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I do
Yeah,
think it's a nice touch that other players show up as like a different model. Um,
Mhm.
But
I have certain frustrations with some of the vehicle mechanics in like modern day WoW because I think we've kind of gotten to this point where you hop into a vehicle, it gives you three buttons. One button is a short cooldown, small damage. The next button is a medium cooldown, medium damage, and the third button is a long cooldown, long damage. I'm just like, can I get a little variety,
yeah, or
please?
the third one is a heal when you're low button.
Yeah, 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 and then there's like a healed channel or whatever. Like the one I'm thinking about in well, actually this one is good, but another one that exists is in the Maw for the Kyrian invasion where you get into a thing and you have like a sniper button, you have like a machine gun button, and you have like a punch or whatever. That's a vehicle that feels really good because like I can do, you know what I mean? Like I can change up my tactic to do the thing I need to do. If I need to kill a bunch of little guys, I machine gun them all down. If I got to get one of those watch commander guys who's like posted on a platform somewhere, right? You snipe him, and that feels good.
yeah, I agree. Um, Blue says that she hates the supply drop one. Um, I feel that. It's not my least favorite, but like I like um, there's a couple like again there's I think a handful that fall more into like the TDM camp. And it's like sometimes that's just kind of like God, I just want to be done with my Corthia dailies right now, and I need to do
Mhm.
this when to like fill the bar up. But I get that. Like yeah, the only one that really, like I said, that really sticks out to me as being absolutely terrible is the critter one, and that's even less bad now. But I think along with that though, something that they did well was like having enough little like besides like the rares are part of this, but like the mushrooms, the chests that aren't visible on the map that you can just kind of see, like the guys that are holding extra relics, right? Like there's little things that you
Mhm.
can do along the way to kind of just have fun, right? Like with it. I think this is a super cool thing to do, and it definitely held my attention for a while, right? It's just kind of like, oh, I can wander around Korthia and do stuff, and not feel too. And part of that is like, um, the lore the relic masters or whatever it is that rep grind. I do think like the last level in particular is a little too long for like to be like super compelling. But very early on, I was like hardcore, like running around trying to like get that number up because I wanted to like hit the next level. Um, but
Yeah,
but
that one is an interesting one because it simultaneously has like one of the more important things um that you need because it is the way to upgrade all your conduits, right?
right,
You can put in the thing you upgrade your conduits, you can put in the thing you can get a gem slot, right? Putting that after like the huge grind, I feel like is a complicated like on one hand, I think you need to have something. You need to have some reason to do that grind or
right,
whatever, right? But on the other one, that feels weirdly like mandatory, and I almost sort of feel like this is a problem of the feeling more than it's a problem like of the thing. You know, like we probably overestimate how much having upgraded conduits matters as players, right? Um, because I feel like the appropriate design space for that is over the course of the patch, it is the longest goal you get, and it is a catch-up mechanic for this thing that you get in other places. So for instance, you can get a 252 conduit out of the mythic raid, right? So if you are only a heroic raider like you and I, this gives us an outlet to get max level conduits, and it gives us an outlet to get gem slots. But like generally speaking, we should be getting those conduits from doing high level raid or whatever else, right? And I think as a catch-up mechanic, that kind of makes a certain amount of sense. But when it is viewed as the primary way that you are going to upgrade your conduits, right? If you were to tell a person the best way to upgrade your conduits from 226 to 252 is to get to tier 6 of, Korthia, that feels incorrect to me as like a main way to do the thing, right? Um, and I also sort of feel like those upgrades are built to that they're built to give reason for someone to do the world content that otherwise wouldn't, which is good, right? Like I don't want the game to just be a raid log simulator,
Right.
right? Like I want a good reason to go out into the world. I want a good reason to do world content like Korthia or these Maw invasions or sort of whatever else. But like if that is a mandatory part of the process, that is less fun than if it is sort of an optional part of the process, right? And my gut tells me that that stuff is probably not powerful enough to really matter. My in general, my mantra is that nothing matters when it comes to World of Warcraft, and we obsess over these like tiny percentages of like power upgrades or whatever. But I also feel like, most players don't view things in those terms, and so they orient themselves in a really shitty way towards the game sometimes.
I think I agree with that. I would say I would come at it from the other direction. I think the primary problem with that level 6 isn't necessarily the power lock behind it, because I think I'm with you in terms of like absolute matter. Just like that last level feels like it takes so long to run up the pole, and like there's not a lot of stuff to like if I were spending my relic points in the meantime on something, I'd feel less bad about it, but I'm not. Right, just because there's like not the only thing there's not a lot of consumables, or at least not
Yeah.
like, a lot of consumables that you're grinding through. And the problem, I think the big problem is like the little bit of like extra hunting you're doing doesn't put enough of a dent in your progression. I feel like to make it feel like it's worth it, right? Like at the earlier levels, it is like, oh, I can run around Korthia for half an hour and get like half a bar of rep out, right? And so that feels worthwhile. Whereas the last level just feels like it's like, whatever, I'll get to it when
Yeah,
I
I
get to
almost
it.
sort of feel like the conduit thing should have been at like rank 4 or something,
Mm,
right? And you should have just, and like because you still need the currency to buy the thing itself.
right,
So what you end up is you're in this situation where you're doing dailies for currency that you won't be able to spend for weeks on end, right?
right,
Whereas in a version of events where let's say it comes on rank 4, and I got rank 4 really quickly. I got rank 4 maybe like a week or two after the patch, right? And then getting rank 5 and getting rank 6 was way, was way longer and took way longer. I sort of feel like then if the grind is actually picking up the currency to buy the thing, I would feel better about it
I
than
agree.
picking up
Yeah.
rep to spend the thing I already have the currency for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think maybe what they needed was like, can you buy like there's a lesser version of that upgrade one? What level? What can you buy that at?
Oh yeah, the soul twinning
Yeah,
construct or whatever.
yeah. I've
I
picked
don't know
them
if you
up.
can buy that.
I've picked them up like from chests in Korthia. Like maybe putting that in, or maybe putting an intermediate level between that one and like maybe a 230 something level conduit that you could put there. That way you have something to like encourage people to grind at the top level for. But I guess you already
Yeah.
have like the socket ones, right? Like, and right now I'm just holding on to my relics because I got nothing to spend them on, right? Like, um, I'm I trust that I'll eventually get there, or
Yeah,
not.
when I got there, I just immediately spent all of my money and I got all of my relics, or I got all of my conduits to max like immediately. That isn't true for every single conduit because there are off spec conduits obviously, but for my main spec conduits, I now have them all at 252 because of the relics I got were like good enough, which is like a freeing feeling because it is also fun to be like done with the grind.
Yeah, yeah,
But I want to be able to go to Korthia if I want to, right? Or do a thing and still get a reward out of it, right? Like I still do the maw assaults or whatever. And partially that's just because the maw assaults, I just find those fun, right? Um, as this sort of bi-weekly thing that is kind of a big burst of, like useful currency because it gives you Korthite crystals, it gives you research, it gives you soul cinders, right? But at the same time, I don't want that to be like useless once the grind is over. So like
right.
maybe I'll get 2 of them this week that are just like a thing that I can use to upgrade to the next conduit or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, what else? Maybe that's actually a good jumping off point. Like, I have something. How did you feel about professions? I will say, like, from my perspective, like, engineering got like jack squat. Like, for a hot second, I used the improved crafter's mark for my helmet, but then like there's a domination socket that I need to prioritize, right? And I don't have any use for the Quartzite crystals other than like putting them on the market as I watch their value slowly go down. So um,
Yeah, I mean, I love professions, but part of that is because like I've invested very hard in professions. Like I'm probably a different sort of player because I had a lot of gold to begin with, and I just generally like making, like making gold. I obviously bought the Brutosaur last expansion, right? And part of that is just like a willingness to engage in professions on a grindy, farmable level that other folks don't necessarily have. But because I walked into 9.1 with maxed out legendary recipes, I was in this unique position where all of my quartzite crystals were really valuable because I could turn that into a legendary and then sell that legendary for like 400,000 gold, right? Um, like I'm like at 5.3, 5.4 million gold at this point. And so I've really enjoyed it, especially just on the lines of for the last couple of expansions, I've played a blacksmith, and a blacksmith is not a fun gold making profession, right? If you want to make gold, you go alchemist, you go enchanter, right? You don't go blacksmith. So having something where I as a blacksmith can put on a very high value item on the auction house and have people regularly buy it, that feels really great. Anytime I sell legendary, I feel like $1 million, right? um but at the same time, I think that I'm like that's a deep minority kind of player, right? Because I had the kind of gold where I could just burn hundreds of thousands of gold to millions. Honestly, it took me 9 million gold to max out all of my legendary recipes, actually. So, you know,
I
that was fun.
I
I
would
I
say
enjoyed that, but I
that
don't
sounds
think
that
other
sounds
players
interesting as
do.
kind of like a long term thing, right? The thing that like I like aggravates me from my perspective is like I don't even have like a long term goal to work. It's engineering, right? At some level, like I know that's the case. Usually we get like a mount that like it's like over the course of the expansion you find all the materials and put it together.
Yeah.
Um, um, like I said, even our slot is like you have to have the domination slot. So like it's not even like you can like ride that helmet for a little while. Um, but uh, I don't I understand that engineering is like a dumb thing off in its own corner. So, but like it's fine. I do cooking sometimes, like sell off like extra like feasts and whatever, which is a nice bit of money. But yeah. Um. So outside of Corthia, what do you think about like we talked a little bit about like the changes to like the adjacent area of the Maw, um, with the invasions. How do you feel about the
Yeah.
rest of the world, like the Maw
How do I
included?
feel about the rest of the world? I think there is a bit of a problem in I feel like one of the things that is tough about Korthia is that it took away all of the focus from the rest of the Shadowlands, which is not something that I experienced when it came to Legion or when it came to BFA, where I was doing my emissaries pretty regularly along both of those expansions. Mostly because those had really useful rewards. Like they gave gear relatively often. They gave gear that went all the way up to normal raid gear really quickly. So I felt like I was getting upgrades out of those for the first couple of weeks, which was not true in Shadowlands, where the callings give gold every time. Basically, that's it. There were also the Azerite Power ones, right? The Azerite Power ones were really useful. Lou asked in the chat, you don't enjoy your daily cash drop. I do, to a certain extent, enjoy my daily cash drop, but it feels kind of like a drop in the bucket a little bit when I'm making the kind of money that I'm making. It's like 2,000 gold. That's like pocket change, which is maybe like a very specific problem to being a person who farms, enough items to just be like making 100,000 gold on a legendary at the drop of a hat.
What can a feast cost? 50,000 gold?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that. I mean, it's funny because like there's sometimes when we're doing like mythics or whatever, and I like run out of health pots or something, right? And I'll be like, "Oh, hold on one second. I just need to buy some health pots." And I'll get on my Brutosaur, I'll buy 80 health pots or whatever. And my healer, he'll be like, "Why did you do that? I could have sent you health pots. I could have just like gone on my alchemist and sent you some health pots." And I'm just like, honestly, the minute and a half it would take you to switch over, make 20 health pots, send them to yourself, and then trade them to me is worth less of my time than the 400 gold. You know what I mean? Like it just like I would much rather have that whole interaction be done in 5 fucking seconds than waste a minute and a half of my life on this,
Well,
right?
Jeffrey Bezos of World of Warcraft. Some of
Yeah, I
us
mean,
save the
and it
clock.
happens, and I'm using health pots as like a certain example, but it
Right.
happens with everything.
Oh yeah.
I do this with like flasks all the time, right? But like flasks are maybe to buy a stack of 20, that's maybe 20,000 gold, right? Which I think a lot of people would balk at. They'd be like, 20,000 gold. You're just like 20, but like to me 20,000 gold is 1/5 of the of a legendary that probably sells for about 100,000, which like the legendary don't sell that often and they require a lot of upkeep, right? One of the things that I'm constantly doing is I'm canceling all my auctions and then relisting them, right? Because people undercut you and most people just aren't buying, like a legendary is kind of like a one-time purchase. Um so I guess
You know
that's
what,
kind of
buddy? I would be
my
interested to see how, like, if you directed like this energy that you put into like the WoW legendary market into like the real stock market to see how you do there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the funny thing, the WoW legendary market is nice because I can just log on and do it in a minute. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's lunch. I'm whatever. I'm gonna put on a 20 minutes of a Hearthstone video, right? And I'll just log on to WoW. I'll do my dailies and I'll churn my auctions real quick, right? Turn them around. Um, but yeah, so that has sort of affected my view. Like I just don't do the callings anymore, and I really used to like doing emissaries and like world quests. Like part of it was the world quests were pretty varied in Legion and BFA. It didn't feel like I was doing the same thing over and over again, even if I was legitimately doing that, right? Like they were varied enough week to week, day to day, that I was probably seeing a world quest once every 2 weeks or so, which felt fine. Like that's a pretty good, like that's a pretty good rotation for like a world quest. But the Shadowlands world quests are much more pervasive than that. It feels like there are far fewer of them, and therefore I am doing the same world quest over and over again, quicker and quicker, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think part of the
And
I was gonna say I think part of the problem there is that the anima just isn't valuable anymore. Like even like I've got some stuff I need to buy, but like I'm gated by grateful offerings or whatever, which
yep.
is like a very small subset of things I can do. Um
Yeah, I
and
mean, grateful offerings might actually like revitalize my interest in doing all this shit, just because in 9.1.5, grateful offerings drop out of calling chest.
right.
So the impetus to go do a calling is a lot higher because that currency isn't as gated as it, like as it was before. I also like went really hard on this stuff in 9.0, right? Where I was like I was basically logging on every night and I was doing a circuit and killing doing every Anima world quest every day because I was really going hard for my like the Anima armor set or whatever, which required a ton of grinding. And to a certain extent, that's fun, right? It's a fun, just dumb grind doing that hardcore grind or whatever. But it meant that when I walked into 9.1, I feel like a lot of other people had things that they could buy with their anima that I was just like, oh yeah, I have that already. It's like
I mean, I didn't go
that's
nearly as hard as you, but I feel like I hit that cap like pretty. I think part of it is like at least I expected to get like some more things to do with my anima in
yeah.
9.1. I really didn't get a lot, right? Plus Korthia dropped so much of it, right? Like, um, maybe that's the fundamental mismatch because like even the 1,000 anima a weekly is just kind of trivial at this point. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, almost all of my anima just goes towards Korthite crystals at this point. So I just
Oh,
buy
you
a
buy
set
them
of Korthite
directly.
crystals. Yeah, I just buy, it's like 25K to get 5 Korthite crystals, which is honestly like maybe not even like worth it super, but it's just like it's just like a way that I offload anima. I have been saving it more and more. Like this was a bigger problem when the cap was 35. Now it's 100K, 200K maybe. So I'm probably just gonna sit on it because why not, right? But I feel like anima has definitely like decreased a lot in value, over the course of like 9.1. I also just like wish there was more stuff to spend it on, right? Like a version, I think I made a Reddit comment along this line, like a version of 9.1 that includes a chest, right? Let's say you could buy a chest for 10,000 anima from a broker or whatever, and you pop open the chest and it reads your appearances and it says, here's an appearance you don't have. Bing, here's the item for that
Hmm.
appearance, right? I would be doing anima all the time for that, right? Like just as this like an incredibly dumb sync of anima into the thing just because like an appearance, that's a valuable commodity to me, right? And there's a lot of them in the game that I don't have because they're just like esoteric. Oh, where
Yeah.
it's like you got to do some quest on Tenaris, that's a pain that I've just never done or whatever else kind of thing, right? Like, um,
Do you farm appearances off the auction house?
no, I could. I have long thought about it because at this point I'm holding all of this money and I have nothing to
I was gonna
spend it
say
on.
because I do, right? Like I don't spend over
Oh,
like a certain
really?
I don't spend over a certain amount, but like I'll like because they've got the nice filters for it now. I'll like click it on and I'll like buy basically at this point I buy everything that's under 250 gold in the categories that I can. Um
That's so interesting. I haven't even thought about doing that, but actually that's a kind of great idea.
right. So, I probably shouldn't have said that because now they're all going to be gone. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's fair, I
although you can
guess.
afford the more expensive ones, right? Like occasionally I'll like look through and like
Yeah, there's a rhino mount on our auction house that's been on
ooh,
there for the better part of a year for 2.5 million gold. And I was like, maybe I should get the fucking rhino mount, The rhino mount is an old TCG, like the WoW
oh yeah,
trading card
yeah.
game used to have like mounts and stuff, and the rhino mount is one of them. And obviously that card game has been discontinued. You can't get the mounts anymore. Um, there's like a real part of me that wants to there's a real part of me that wants to go get that mount, just like as a way to spend this dumb amount of money that I have. It was easier with the Brutosaur because the Brutosaur I was really looking forward to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it was this thing that it was a thing
Plus
that
it's
was a
got
lot of money that I
functionality,
wanted.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
unique functionality.
I
Um,
also I also could theoretically burn all of this into like Hearthstone packs. This is what I did before when I was making a lot of money in Legion. That's when I bought Destiny 2 with WoW Fun Bucks, and I bought a lot of Hearthstone cards with WoW Fun Bucks, where basically every time I made 250K, I would put a token on the auction house, and get $15 of battle net balance or whatever, like whatever the thing was. And the Brutosaur trained me out of that because the Brutosaur was like, oh, big amounts of gold are valuable for this reason, right? So I've just been hoarding it, but I'm hoarding it for no reason. There's nothing big to buy like that anymore.
hmm, interesting. Very interesting. But yeah. Uh,
So yeah.
yeah.
I've so that's sort of my thing with the other zones. I also feel like the disconnected nature of something isn't what I'm really looking for in WoW zones. I like each of the zones individually, and I think that they're fun and interesting, but the feeling of getting on the flight path or whatever to like zoop from Oribos to Maldraxxus is just like less fun than flying over Zandalar or the Broken Isles was to get to like these individual world quests.
Yeah.
So that's like a pretty basic
This is
that's like a
this
pretty basic criticism that I have.
this is a thing that I actually think that works in favor for engineers, which is the wormhole generator is actually great. You like pop it and you can like just pop between the four zones, right? Like
Yep,
um
yep. I know engineers who have that exact functionality, and I am sort of jealous. Like not jealous enough
enough to
to
switch.
actually make a
Yeah.
change. Yeah, but medium jealous, right?
Yeah.
As that's a cool thing that I would
Yeah.
have enjoyed.
It's on a 15
Um,
minute cooldown too. It's great. Um
yeah, wow, that's tiny, right?
yeah. Um and I mean most of them put you in obnoxious places. Like the Maldraxxus one is good. But like because it puts you like on like a mountain to the northwest of the arena. This is
Okay.
because like Maldraxxus has got a very like spoken hub type
Mhm.
design. Whereas like Revendreth, it puts you in like the southwestern corner, and Bastion puts you all the way in the south. And I think my hot take is that Bastion doesn't have enough flight paths, but like it doesn't matter now because we've got flying. Um, but yeah, and then I think what's the other one? What's the last one? Ardenweald. Ardenweald puts you in a decently central place, but I don't use it that much because I have my Hearthstone set to Ardenweald. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, part of me wants to like go deeper into, like the individual like covenants or whatever, right? Like I have alts in some of these covenants and I've done like the abomination factory, for instance. But I'm just like not super interested in farming content that is not on Bairn, which is a weird feeling for me. Like normally I'm very alty, right? Like I'm an altaholic when it comes to this stuff, but for some reason I just haven't really been able to like get into doing uh some of these other grinds on other covenants for, whatever reason. But that's another 9.1.5 thing because theoretically I'll be able to send anima from Baron to my alts in a reasonable way. They'll probably tax it a little bit, right? That's normally what happens, right? You spend 500 to get 400 or something like that.
You can switch covenants easily as well, which
Yeah.
is interesting.
So theoretically, I'll like farm things on Baron. I feel like that's the big headline, right? Like when it comes to 9.1.5, there's two headlines. Number one, you can switch covenants at renown 80. Number two, Legion time walking, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about those as sort of headlining this, medium patch?
Hmm. So the covenant switching is interesting in that like if I can do it easily, I might put some time into it. But like I can't imagine rating in anything but like Night Fae because like that's what I'm optimized for, and I know all those conduits, and I know like I love the Phalanx stomp, right? Like
Mhm.
um so like if there's any sort of limit on that at all, we're still rating. I'm not gonna want to do it because gonna want to rate as Night Fae. Um but the Legion time walking is interesting to me just because like Legion was the last time I really seriously played. Like I didn't stick around long for BFA, so like
Sure.
jumping back to Legion is like, oh, I'm going back to the thing. Although I never really did the Mage Towers. I did the Mage Towers enough to get the Rogue appearance and the because I was playing my
Yeah, so
Alliance.
they're bringing the Mage Tower
Yeah,
back, which I
yeah,
think is nuts. And there's a
yeah,
huge debate in the community about this, which I I said I think on Reddit or on Twitter or something, I was like, it's weird to have no opinion on this, right? Like people are really mad that they're bringing the Mage Tower back, but you can't re-earn the appearances, right? But at the time, they said the appearances are locked, right?
right.
Um, the uh the appearances being locked is like a big contentious point because there's a bunch of people who are like unlock everything, nothing should be gated behind this stuff, right? They call it FOMO gameplay, right, where it's like you have to do the thing before a certain time or
Right.
else you get the FOMO. And so that's it's honestly talked about in the same way that people talk about like gambling with like loot box mechanics, right? Like it's almost like this weird sort of psychological appeal or whatever, which I find a little bit strange. And then on the other side, there are like the people who are like, this is a real achievement of mine that I worked hard for under a certain set of circumstances. Anyone else could have worked as hard as I did, but they didn't, and they should not get it, under the very fair circumstances of these parameters, right? If you
Yeah.
wanted the appearance, you should have paid attention and done the thing. Otherwise, tough kind of thing. Which I don't agree with either of those takes. I think kind of both of those are sort of like wrong. But I also don't really have my own opinion. I just kind of don't. I don't really care that much,
Yeah.
right?
No.
Like I got all of the appearances that I wanted, and I don't really mind that there are appearances in the game that I don't have access to, right? Famously, the Miss Pandaria challenge mode and the Warlords of Draenor challenge mode appearances are just not available, right? Like I had to have been playing during those times doing challenge mode dungeons in order to get those appearances, and I didn't. So rest in pepperonis.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm of like two minds about this. At one point, I think like if it's been 5 years or whatever, I think like that's enough exclusivity for it to like be meaningful. But I actually think the right solution to this is like make them avail like leave certain colors exclusive, and then like let like like because I think that base shape is like something different. Right? Like I would not be mad if like you could get like the base shape of those things, but with
Yeah,
like a
this is what
less
they're doing with the bear, right? So the
yeah
bear is getting a new appearance because that Legion bear form is unique. Um, yeah, I'm generally okay with like the idea of like doing these for recolors, especially because I think it would just be a fun thing to grind out again.
yeah
I think
exactly
something that was true for the Mage Tower originally was it was a really huge impulse for a lot of players to play stuff that wasn't their main, right? Like obviously I was gonna get the Mage Tower stuff on Baron, he's my main, right? But now all of a sudden I'm leveling a rogue, I'm leveling a druid, I'm leveling a mage because I want these particular challenge mode or mage tower appearances on those classes. So a version of things where I'm doing that again, I think is actually pretty neat.
I
But
think I agree. Um, yeah, again, recolors for like a different recolor, I think makes a lot of sense, right? Like to your point, the only reason I played my Alliance tune as hard as I did was because I wanted that rapier appearance, and I got it. So
yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I mean they are doing the armor, which is nice. The Tomb of Sargeras recolors, which I first of all I really like those armor sets in general. And I sort of want this sort of thing to like come back. I like the idea of coming back to some of these old armor sets and making new versions of them, for time walking. My dream has always been that I want there to be time walking like leveling goals, right? Where if you level a character in the expansion, kind of like to me this feels like a seasonal Diablo character, right? Where it's a character you can't interact with anything else, right? But you level it in the expansion up to max. You're in Pandaria, you level all the way to max, you get all the lore master achievements. Maybe you do some other stuff that's like end game story quest content or whatever, right? So I guess you'd have to do like the Isle of Thunder stuff, story campaign. You'd have to do maybe some of the stuff surrounding Garrosh and in the Vale of Eternal Blossoms or whatever. Um, and doing that would get you this cosmetic reward. Maybe get you, like a recolor of a raid set. I would absolutely go apeshit for that sort of thing. And I feel like it is the kind of thing. I feel like it's the sort of thing that would revitalize leveling as content in the way that Mythic Plus revitalized sort of dungeons as content.
Yeah, that makes I absolutely agree with that. Speaking of Mythic Plus, how do you feel about like the Mythic Plus aspect of Legion?
Oh, the Legion Mythic Plus is very spicy. My understanding, and this is far out reports. People don't think it's going to matter that much. Most of the best gear is still going to come from Shadowlands, and Legion Mythic Plus is going to be a fun alternative to Shadowlands dungeons every once in a while. I think the danger with Legion Mythic Plus is you get to this point where you are you have a trinket, and it's this best in slot amazing trinket, and then Legion time walking comes up, and now I need to run Black Rookhold 200 gazillion times until the trinket drops and I get it and I can upgrade it with Valor, and now it's my biz trinket or whatever. I think that's a pretty frustrating state of affairs, and I don't love that. But my understanding is that all of those things have kind of been nerfed a little bit, sort of like stealth nerfed, where it's like in Legion, this thing was better than it is in Shadowlands, just because the tuning is maybe like 10%, kind of like cut down or whatever, so that most bad Shadowlands trinkets will be better than the good Legion trinkets. And I think that's perfect, right? If I need stopgap stuff, right? Like if I'm sitting on a piece of gear that's not quite right, but like not quite best in slot. Oh, cool. Here's a holdover thing. I got it from Legion Time Walking. I'm gonna upgrade it a little bit, but it's not my best in slot, right? But I think any version of things where like a best in slot thing is hidden behind 1 week of Legion time walking once every 4 months would be people would be first of all, people would be angry about that. And
yeah,
second of all, I think that would just be like frustrating. That said, I do wish it was around for longer. I think my thing with time walking is at this point, I just want there always to be time walking up. I feel like the correct way to do time walking, like if it was up to me, I would just say, okay, it's time walking Burning Crusade week. So it switches to time walking Burning Crusade. There's the weekly event to get the chest, right? And if you do it, you still get your chest, you get your 226 gear. Well, that week is over, fine. Passes on to the next week. Maybe the next week is like World Quest or whatever. But the Burning Crusade time walking stays up. So if you want to do anything Burning Crusade time walking related, you still can. There's no incentive for it. It's just there in the background. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, whenever the next time walking comes up in the weekly rotation, it swaps. Wrath of the Lich King time walking, you can do your thing for the chest. That sticks around for 2 or 3 weeks. Cataclysm time walking sticks around for 2 or 3 weeks. Whatever that schedule is like. I don't know what the
yeah.
schedule is, right? Um, and that would still make it so that Legion time walking is still only up once every couple of months, like once every 4 months, I think is the rotation, right? I think it's 12 weeks, right? But I think it would be better if it was up for 3 weeks out of 12 weeks than if it was up for 1 week out of 12 weeks, if that makes sense.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Um,
I also think it's very cool that they made their own affix for this called the Infernal Affix, which I don't know what it does yet. I haven't looked that deeply into it. But I love the idea that especially as an evergreen thing. One of the things that was interesting about Legion is that it didn't have a seasonal affix, right? But my hope is that when in 10.2, 10.1.5 or whatever, when Battle for Azeroth time walking comes around, my hope is that they bring back either Awakened or Reaping, which were the two most popular affixes from that expansion, and they add, BFA time walking with that affix. I think that that's an amazing system, and I think this is something that will scale better into the future, right? Like as we add more time walking dungeons and everything like that, we'll get into a position where now it is Mythic Plus is always for the expansion that you have, but it also includes a time walking expansion most of the time.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, that would be cool. That would be cool.
I
Um,
I sort of fear the idea. People talk about going back and doing this for some of the older expansions. I think you could maybe get away with it with Warlords and Mists of Pandaria just because those had challenge modes,
right,
which were
right.
also timed like Mythic Plus. It just didn't do the scaling up and up and up thing. And I sort of wonder if you could make those work for challenge modes. But I fear a version of things where they're like, oh, here's time walking
Classic.
Utgard Keep. Like I think that would suck.
Time walking dead mines. Go. Um,
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like I've always thought that there should be time walking like classic. Like it
yeah,
feels weird that time walking starts with Burning Crusade. And at the time, the explanation for that was that when you're leveling, you spend a ton of time at classic, right? Your first 60 levels, you spend a lot of
right.
time there, right? But that's no longer true, right? Because leveling is now parallelized rather than sequential. So I sort of wonder if there might be like time walking classic in the works.
Yeah, yeah. That would be. I mean, especially because there's so much support for classic, right? Like given that classic
Yeah.
exists, yeah, that would be
Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
part of it is also the dungeon philosophy changed so much just even between
Yeah,
classic and Blackrock and I'm sorry, Burning Crusade. Um Comparatively, right? Like imagine a world where you get time walking like Blackrock depths. I would love that. I think that sounds super fun, but I don't know. Maybe you could turn it into a mega dungeon. My hope for
mm,
Legion Time Walking that did not come to pass was that they would bring back the Karazhan mega dungeon as a level appropriate mega dungeon. They would give you like 226 gear, which is like the mega dungeon right now or whatever. I think that would be super fun because honestly, the mega dungeons are great, all of them, and I just feel like they are perfect content that I would love to see on a more regular basis.
yeah. I still haven't done the 9.1 mega dungeon, just because like I hadn't bothered to find anybody to do it with, and like it's got to have a group for it. So, um, that
Yeah,
makes
I
sense.
think it gets the mega dungeons always get more relevant when they enter the Mythic Plus rotation. And normally what happens is they spend a patch as regular dungeons, then they move into, they divide the first half, top half, bottom half. Um like it was upper and lower Karazhan, it was upper and lower Mechagon. And I imagine the exact same things can happen with Tazavesh and will be in this world of
Yeah,
doing Mythic plus Tazavesh in 9.2.
makes sense. Um, real quick
Which you will
before
still not see because you never do Mythic Plus.
no, uh, before we run out of time,
Sure.
Torghast is I think the last big thing.
Oh yeah, I think the Torghast changes have been great. I have
I
loved
agree.
doing Torghast every single week that it's always engaging because the torments are a little weird, right? Like, but they make me think about it in a more complicated sense. And then I like the box of many things, which I've now maxed out at this point. Because
Okay.
I guess, when you just do it week over week at this point. I have one more to get, and I'll have the full mega achievement, the meta achievement, where you get flawless in all 6 wings and you get a mount out of that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, no, I
Which I
haven't.
think I can get this week. I haven't done my tour guest yet this week.
I haven't been keeping super up on Torghast, but like I've been enjoying it. Monk continues to be like eminently soloable for everything, so that's super fun.
Yeah.
No, I've been, like it's. I think it's a good mode. Um, you know, if I were more inclined to just play WoW, I think I'd be playing more Torghast. I just went on and did other things, but I do like the changes. I like that not like the like you said like the torments are interesting. Some of them I think are like some of them I find more annoying than others, but like that's kind of like they rotate like daily basically. If
Yeah.
you want to change out the torments you're getting, so that's fine. Um, yeah, no, I don't think I've got much other to say. I think I think they did a good job with them, right? Like very
I'm a
compelling.
little sad that the old Torghast didn't work out. I feel like at the end of the day, it was sort of a failed experiment, but I just don't think that you can really do an untimed version of the game anymore because it just makes everything so binary, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You get to this point where every fight, it's the same sort of thing. I was telling a friend of mine, who has Charles Powell been on this cast? My friend
Uh,
Charles Powell, who may or may
maybe
not be a friend of
he's
the
definitely written in
cast.
questions.
He's
So
definitely written in questions. That's true. So, friend of the cast, Charles Powell. We were talking about Pathfinder because he's playing Pathfinder Kingmaker. I'm playing Pathfinder Kingmaker, and he's never played Pathfinder, the tabletop RPG, right? And he was explaining how he approaches most problems in Pathfinder Kingmaker, which is he has one person that can cast haste and a bunch of essentially auto attackers, full attackers, right? And he just starts every fight by casting haste and full attacking every single fight, basically. And so, if
sounds
there's
like
ever a fight,
Pathfinder. Sounds like a very
yeah,
representative.
and he said, and like, if there's ever a situation where he can't just auto attack something down, he's like super fucked. And he says he never uses spells on anything but haste, basically, on anything but buffs for his auto attackers, which, fair enough. And I explained to him the way that I play Pathfinder Kingmaker, which is the very traditional, tried and true method of the 10-minute adventuring day, which is I enter into a map, I buff up my whole party with all of this, displacement, 1 minute per level, right? Bless, 1 minute per level, bull's strength, or bear's endurance, cat's grace, right? Like all of those 1 minute per level buffs, hurricane bow, leaden blades, right? And when those buffs fall off, okay, go to sleep. time to rest, right? So every adventuring day for my party lasts about 10 minutes, right? And that's kind of the problem with the original version of Torghast where it's not timed, right? If there's no time pressure, all Torghast becomes is a binary pass fail of can I kill this thing with all of my cooldowns up? If yes, you succeed. If no, nothing. And so the clever thing that I think happened with this version of Torghast is they basically removed that layer of even any difficulty at all, and basically said, you know what? If you enter Torghast, you're getting some fucking soul cinders. That boss is not going to lose any health. You can just run your head into it over and over and over again as many times as you want, right? But the additional rewards of doing the flawless runs, getting deeper, getting those better cosmetics, saving the phantasma so that you can buy the gold cosmetics, which I think is extra clever because it's sort of this extra handicap on top of that, because you can't actually spend phantasma on anima powers on the two mid-level guys because you need that phantasma most of the time in order to get it on the max level floor. Drops a bunch of anima, it drops uh the conduit shard or the socket shard, which is like useful, and just stratifying out the success failure of any individual Torghast run makes it just like so much more engaging and valuable. So a lot of folks have maligned the fact that Torghast has kind of become another version of Mythic Plus that has this overarching time pressure where you're constantly like doing a thing or whatever. But I think that's just a necessary part of the
Yeah,
gameplay,
yeah.
at this point, right? Like the game design is just sort of like too far forward to account for anything else along those sorts of lines.
I think I agree. I definitely agree with that. Um, do we have anything else we want to talk about WoW before we punt into our weeks?
I'm sure we'll be talking more about 9.1.5, especially when it comes
Yeah.
out. So we can punt away. What have you been up to this week? What's been on your mind?
All right. So I did two kind of big things this week. The first one was I played a bunch of the Halo Infinite technical multiplayer preview, which was a lot of fun. It felt like Halo. I was playing on PC, so obviously not totally like it. Not a super huge fan of some of the weapons, and I don't understand how some of the equipment works, but mostly it felt like I was back in high school or middle school even at this point. Just like shooting some baddies, sticking some people with some plasma grenades, and getting kills or getting killed. Not a huge fan of kind of like the default weapon, which is this is assault rifle type thing, but it is what it is. I do find myself missing the kind of COD style loadout so that I could so I was actually thinking about this. One of the things that loadouts make rare weapons harder to do. Although I think you could do a version of it. It's just that with a loadout style, you can get good with a weapon by just having enough time to practice with it. Whereas my time to practice with, say, the battle rifle is whenever I can find it on the map, and I don't know the maps well enough to get them. And then if I get killed, I don't have it anymore, right? So I guess you could spend some time in training mode, which they have a training mode, but I don't care enough about this to spend hard lab hours like I do with, say, Guilty Gear or whatever. So you know But you know, it was fun. It was Halo. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I've got Xbox Game Pass, so I will have it when it comes out. I might even check out the campaign. So, not a huge fan of kind of like it did it did the battle pass thing. It did the cosmetics thing. Um, and I liked it better. Like the colorations are like not consumables. But like they're like you earn colorations and you can apply them, which is not a thing I like. I liked it much better when you could like do that all custom out. Um, and I think that's a shame that that's fallen to kind of like the battle pass model, but I don't know. Otherwise, it's the perfectly like I think like the different armor shapes or whatever, the different visor shapes could be fine as battle pass elements. But I wish like the colorations. I haven't seen any decals yet. Some interesting things is that you could put prosthetics on your Spartan, which is a very interesting design choice. I like it's cool. And it's just not something I expected to see. Like I gave my Spartan a prosthetic right arm just because why not, right? Like
I always like that in sci-fi. You know, like I think that that's just like a cool detail of any
yeah,
sci-fi universe, right? Like some people have prosthetics, some people like don't, but it always feels very I want to say like Star Wars, right? Like so like very like dirty in a rather than slick, right?
yeah,
Whereas so for instance, good example of this. StarCraft has characters with prosthetics, right? You know, Swan has a prosthetic arm or whatever else, or you get a guy whose name I don't remember, but he's like the general that you fight with on Char at the end of StarCraft 2. He gets a big prosthetic arm or whatever. And that feels true to form for that sort of universe, right? Because it's very gritty and grimy and dirty, and people are doing things like losing arms. But Mass Effect doesn't have any prosthetics that I can think of off the top of my head. Maybe there are some somewhere, right? um which I think makes sense because Mass Effect is a much more sleek universe compared to something like StarCraft, something like Star Wars, where prosthetics are kind of like all over the place. And I always sort of felt like Halo was more sleek than it was grimy in
yeah,
that sort of like I don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
sense.
The prosthetics definitely fit in pretty well with like the aesthetic, right? Like they're like they're clearly prosthetics, but they're like you know they and you can you actually the arm ones have like you can get like prosthetic from the shoulder or from the elbow or just the hand. But like they feel like they're part of like the Spartan armor,
Okay,
in a good
that's
way.
cool.
So yeah, um, so yeah, no, I'm just some like neat, very neat stuff there. But I don't know. That comes out this winter. I'll play it. Like I said, it's coming. Uh, the
I
other,
People hated Halo 5, right? Like my
yeah,
understanding is Halo 4 was well, it was okay. You know, like nobody was mad about Halo 4, but people really hated Halo 5.
yeah. I think so. My understanding there were a couple things. One is like it did kind of like the new Coke thing in that like it tried to codify itself too much, and that's a Call of Duty-ify itself too much.
Okay, yeah.
Like doing these layout things. I know a big point of of controversy was like there is sprint in Infinite, which is like not something that was traditional. Like that was a very COD thing that they brought into the
Yeah,
game.
that's not a Halo thing, right?
Um, and there is sprint in this game, but it is like it feels reasonable. Like I wasn't using it a ton. Like you use it in big blank spaces, but if you get caught sprinting, you're probably screwed. So like if you're even near danger, you're generally not sprinting. Um, I didn't
Is
feel like
Halo so floaty? My big memory of Halo is how floaty it was,
yeah, the
right?
jumps are still
Where
big and floaty. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, um, it feels like I remember it, and maybe I'm not remembering things right, but like you know, the jumps still feel floaty. The Yeah, I think that's definitely there's still some launch pads. This is also limited technical preview, so like we didn't get all the maps, but it feels Halo-y to me. Yeah, yeah. Um, the other big thing I did this week is I watched a Dear Evan Hansen. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. You watch it in the theater?
Yes, I did.
Whoa. What
Did
did
you
you think?
did you watch it?
No, but I now want to because everybody's shitting on it.
Oh,
So
really? I didn't realize people were shitting on it. I don't know. I thought it was fine.
people say it is the new Cats, which I was like, how can anything be the new Cats? Am I right? But
So I suspect that they digitally de-aged Ben Platt. I don't know if that's confirmed or not, but they had a couple of long shots of his face. He's like 28 years old and he's supposed to be a high schooler. Um, Do you know the rough plot of this movie? Like, or at least the premise?
All I have seen of this movie is I don't know the premise outside of the trailer, which I saw in front of Shang-Chi. Did you see that same trailer?
I did not, but I will
Okay.
I will explain the premise to you and also for the benefit of the audience. So,
Okay, sure, sure, sure.
our main character is Evan Hansen, and he is like a neurotic, very nerdy guy, right? Like I feel like people in our audience might identify with this. Maybe you wouldn't because you've always come as long as I've known you, you've always been very confident and self forward. Um,
Sure.
but for me, he was a character that I very much related to. Like he's medicated, I'm not, but like there's obviously there's some stuff there, but like very nervous type of guy. Um, and so as part of so as part of his therapy, he has to write letters to himself. And kind of the inciting incident is some this other character Connor, who's only in the show. It's a Broadway show originally, for a very short period of time. Um, he he for plot reasons gets a copy of one of these letters, and then he goes and kills himself. And the letter "Dear Evan Hansen" is in his because the character writes addresses the letters to himself is in his pocket when he kills himself. So the guy who kills himself is also kind of like a misfit, but we don't see much of him. He just seems kind of violent. Um, because the letter is in his pocket, he thinks that Evan Hansen, like the parents think that Evan Hansen is his best friend. Um, and partially because he's nervous and partially because of the way the plot goes, he leans into the lie that he was his character's best friend, and the show goes on from there. It's also a musical, um, but like the first half of the movie, like the most of the movie for me is like it's very emotional movie. Like there were people crying in the audience while I was seeing like audibly crying,
Wow.
right? It's um uh what is it? The target demographic seems to be very female. Although like I said, I think like nerdy people would find a lot of stuff there. But for me, it was just like most of the movie was like me on the verge of having a heart attack, right? Because it's like, it's like how is this going to resolve itself, right? Like there's no way they let this movie resolve with him like maintaining this lie. It's like, holy God, right? Like how and you just like watch him dig himself deeper into this. And it's like the songs are upbeat. It's a musical, right? Like, and it's like, how I can't enjoy this music because it's like this is like, it's just getting worse. Like,
Yeah, I mean, so I've known that Dear Evan Hansen was a very famous, Broadway musical, right? Very well regarded. I think it won a gazillion Tonys, like the year it came out. It's one of those things that like in the same way that like I heard about Hamilton way before I ever saw like anything Hamilton related, right? Like I was hearing people talk about Dear Evan Hansen a lot. But I didn't know, I didn't know anything more about the show than that. But yeah, apparently it is being resoundingly thrashed for reasons that I have no clue about because I haven't looked into it. I just see people memeing about it on Twitter a lot, which is good for them, I guess. People say it's worse than Cats, which again, I'm just like,
I don't. I should go explore this discourse because I don't like it was
I hope
fine,
you do.
right?
My bet is here's my fundamental bet for this discourse. I don't think you can do a musical in a teen drama cinematographic shell, which is to say that like I don't think that you can shoot a musical in the same way that you can shoot I want to say like super bad. Like what's like a teen drama movie? What are those John Green book movies called? One of
The
those
Fault in Our
ones.
Stars.
The Fault in Our Stars. You can't shoot it the way that you shoot Fault in Our Stars, but I think that it is a very Fault in Our Stars story. So my guess is completely apropos of nothing that whatever the director was, he shot this movie like Fault in Our Stars, and then there's music in it. And musicals are inherently cartoonish. They're inherently anti-diegetic, right? Like they break the fourth wall in a lot of awkward ways that people find frustrating. So if you set up that movie like you set up Rocket Man, right, which is this kind of flight of fancy that will sometimes delve into sort of drama, right, but like for the big musical numbers they are big bombastic musical numbers like you would expect. I think you could probably sell that, but my guess is the that is the thing that people are complaining about, and the only thing I have for that is the trailers looked like Fault in Our Stars really hardcore and didn't feature any of the songs to the best of my not. Maybe there was like a song underlying it, but it's not like I ever saw a character fucking singing, right? So I sort
I,
of wonder if that might be like the core dissonance.
I wouldn't surprise me if people just like didn't like the thing I'm identifying here like just like really throws people off in terms of like you know, part of the theme of this movie is like, there are like, like mental illness is a thing, right? Like,
Sure.
and like there's a lot of kind of like mild there's like the fact that this is all like the main character is kind of a terrible person, right? Like, and it's like it's because he's nervous, right? Like, which is like not quite fair to the movie, but like I could see somebody like pushing it in that direction. Also, like, you know like just a lot of that stuff, right? Like it's got like this kind of like pretensions to like you know mental health awareness type stuff that like maybe doesn't jive with like the core plot so well.
Sure.
um
Yeah, I definitely also think that people have a harder time these days. It feels like this is like the Thanos problem, right? Where, or like the Walter White problem, where people think of Walter as a hero because they kind of misunderstand
like he's the
these,
protagonist, but like
yeah, these interactions of he's the protagonist and he gives himself a justification. Therefore, it's fine that he's poisoning children or whatever else, right? Um, this also happens, I feel like, with uh this happens the other way, right? Like where like good characters who are having tough times, people have a hard time. Like like something about I've been watching Ted Lasso recently. People really like Ted Lasso. It is a good show. I'm having a great time with it. But it's fundamentally a show about, right, like good people trying their best, right? Which in a sitcom kind of world reminds me a lot of Parks and Rec is like this. But the thing that Parks and Rec does is it's good people trying their best in a kind of cartoonishly over the top universe that
right.
fucking hates them, right? That just invents ridiculous problems for them to solve constantly. And that's sort of the source of conflict, right? It is less anything kind of like real and more these sort of like flights of fancy of just absolutely ridiculous townspeople that have absolutely ridiculous satirical demands of their city officials, right? Ted Lasso is sort of the opposite of that, which is that like this is a story of like good people who are trying their best at a very high stakes. Ted Lasso is the story of an American football coach who gets hired to coach an English soccer team. Um, and that has very real and grounded drama of just
Win
soccer
the
is fucking
game.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, the game is hard and they are bad at it. And Ted is sort of set up to fail because he is from these unfamiliar circumstances or whatever else, right?
So, a
Um,
quick question is like the conceit that like somebody screwed up the word football or something. Like I don't understand like why he got hired to
that
coach.
question is I don't want to spoil it. That question is
Okay.
answered in the very first
Okay.
episode. Um, and it kind of progresses from there, obviously, or whatever, right? But I was going to make a point about Dear Evan Hansen with this. What was I fucking going to say?
Uh,
Oh, right, but one of the things that I think people are connecting with when it comes to Ted Lasso is just that kind of everybody in this cast is sort of like unironically a pretty good, well-meaning person. They might have damage, they might have personality traits, they might have some sort of, you know, like flaws, but at the end of the day, I kind of believe these are all good people. And I feel like that is a that sort of like almost like moral simplicity is a little more appealing these days in the cultural zeitgeist compared to more complicated or if I think of Community, which is also very well liked obviously, right? But like like Jeff Winger is pretty not a good person and he does bad things, and it's fine in the sense of the overall show, and every character in there is like that, right? Like our Abed can be narcissistic, Troy is dumb, basically.
yeah.
Pierce is just awful all around, right? Like Annie is too he has a stick up her butt. That like that, like normal like sitcom kind of problems. But I just sort of feel like those have fallen away a little bit.
Yeah.
Just in like the culture, I guess.
Yeah. I also think like the movie or like the show does a job to like convince you like in the way that you would for something like this that like the character is sympathetic in a lot of ways. I just know for me like it kind of like felt hard to reconcile this with it's easy to see how he got where he got, but like reconciling it with what he actually does is just kind of like tough.
Mhm.
Also to avoid spoilers, this movie has a different ending than the show. I went and looked up what the ending of the show was. Um,
Ooh. Maybe that's why everybody hates it.
um, it might be just because of the way it resolves itself. Not that like I don't know. Part of me also thinks that maybe nobody saw the show. Like, very few people saw the musical.
Now I need to see this movie. I have to talk about this. We
Yeah.
have to talk about this movie in more depth, maybe like in the back half of
After,
next week's podcast or something. I'll try and get into it.
yeah.
Well, so we're gonna just to like look at the future. We're obviously gonna be doing something because doesn't something come out this week? Is it Venom this week?
Venom's this
Okay,
week. Yeah.
Venom is this week. Oh God, I think something also came out last week, but it was a little bit more minor.
Yeah. I don't
Maybe
think.
it was Foundation, which is the Apple Plus show
Oh,
based on
okay.
my favorite novel of all time, and I'm too nervous to even watch it because I'm afraid they're gonna fuck it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have Apple Plus, so I was not. That was not on my radar.
Yeah, I mean, I was so they really got me on this one. When I flew to New England to hang out with you and everybody else, they had the first two episodes of Ted Lasso on the um on the plane, and so I watched
Uh,
the first two episodes, and I was like,
Gotta get in.
"You got me."
Yeah.
Tim Cook, you dickhead, like, and so I got my Apple Plus subscription so I could watch all the rest of all the rest of Ted Lasso. And then I also watched Greyhound again, which I talked about last year. Greyhound is where I spent my free trial for Apple Plus, which was the Tom Hanks directed movie that is a World War II movie about like a group of destroyers escorting a merchant convoy across the North Atlantic, and they're fighting like a pack of German U-boats or whatever. And it is so historically accurate to be unfun, but it kind of does the horseshoe theory thing of like it goes so far around the unreal circle that it's actually fun again. Because once you understand, because like so a lot of that movie is about like plotting charts and courses, right? And like yelling and like they teach you these sorts of things over the course of the movie where it's like he's like hard rudder right, and then the guy says hard rudder right, and then he spins a thing, and they turn the boat, and then it goes to a guy on a map who charts where the turn is going to make the boat face, but they don't know where these fucking submarines are, so they're trying to figure out. It's like, whoa, what's the, and the guy in the sonar is like listening to the blips, and he's like, I think I've got propeller screws, and then he reads off a heading, and then the captain goes hard runner left, like, and that's legitimate drama or whatever, but it's born entirely out of like the esoteric mechanics out of hunting submarines in a, I don't know, a 1942 destroyer, I guess. Anyway, I don't know. The point of that was Greyhound is a good movie. Go watch Greyhound.
Very good. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
I think my next one is going to be Mythic Quest, which I am not excited for.
I've heard that,
Mythic
like, friend of the show Monix said it was good. I don't know. I don't know.
Mythic Quest is very regularly talked about people in game dev circles as being like so real it hurts.
Oh, okay.
Like, yeah,
Okay,
like,
yeah. I felt like a little bit about that about like Silicon Valley. So
yeah,
I
like,
get
yeah,
you.
that's what people have compared it to. It's like Silicon Valley, right? Like it's just like it hits too close to home, but it also is too good to not watch because it gets so much very right. And I think in comparison to Free Guy
Right.
and also Grandma's Boy, you've seen Grandma's Boy,
I
right?
have not.
Grandma's Boy is like famous. Every game developer I know has watched Grandma's Boy like a bunch of times. It's like famous, right? Because it is, I guess it's just one of the only movies that purports to be about game development, even though it is
Not. It's a comedy, right?
not.
Like it's like a
Yeah,
stoner
I mean
comedy.
it's a comedy and it is completely ridiculous and has nothing to do with reality, right? But the guy is theoretically a game developer. It's part of the main plot, right? That he's like this like amazing, amazing game developer or whatever. There are more movies like that, but this one came out in like 2006. And it features, I guess, like Adam Sandler's like random friends that nobody knows the name of. So I don't know.
Yeah. Um.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Ted Lasso is good. But I want to watch Foundation because it is, like I said, it's my favorite book of all time, and nobody's ever done it. Nobody's ever made a Foundation
Just
adaptation.
just the first one, or all? There's 3 books, right?
There's actually like a gazillion books, but well, not a gazillion. I think there's maybe like
I thought
8.
Foundation had like 3 core books.
The core trilogy, yeah, is
Okay.
Foundation and Empire, and Second Foundation, which are like that's like the core
Yeah, softcore.
trilogy.
Yeah, yeah.
And by the time you get to Second Foundation, it is a pretty traditional novel, but the first two books are very episodic. which is something that I liked at the time, right? Like the core premise of Foundation is there is a science called psychohistory, which is this combination of psychology and sort of historiography, where this super scientist guy has figured out that he can predict the future because the more people that you can account for, the more predictable their behavior is, right? One person is individually really unpredictable, but hundreds of people are more predictable. Thousands of people are more predictable than that. And then, you scale up to what is essentially a galactic empire, right? Um, and the whole future of this galactic empire is fundamentally predictable, right? He has predicted the future, and the future that he has predicted, the guy's name is Harry Seldon. The future that he has predicted is that the galactic empire he is a part of is going to collapse. It is on its way to collapse. And if nothing gets done about it, there is going to be 20,000 years of anarchy, essentially, where like the warring states of this galactic empire are like turning against themselves until a new one will sort of rise back to prosperity, right? But he has said that you can do a thing, right, where you make a colony on a far-flung world of all of these scientists and academics and thinkers and whatever else, right? And the existence of this colony will reduce that time of turmoil to 1,000 years, right? So he's trying to convince the galactic government to like fund this encyclopedia, right? And that's the Foundation. The Foundation is this group of like scientists and academics on like the edge of the universe. And very quickly, and everybody thinks Harry Seldon is a liar and it's not true, but they do this thing anyway. And very quickly he's proven right. The galactic empire does fall, and there's all this problem. There's all these problems that show up. But the first book of Foundation is actually like 6 stories up across hundreds of years. Like it's like the first 200 years in the existence of the Foundation, right? And so it's tracking like all of these different characters who are in the Foundation because like it's at different time periods, right? Harvey Seldon is actually only in the first couple of there's a prologue, right? He's only in the prologue where he convinces like the people to form the Foundation, and then he immediately dies. And the Foundation is left in the hands of these other characters. One of them is Halvor Sardin, Salvor Hardin, who's one of my favorite characters of all time. And he's really great like witticisms, right? One of the things he says, he's once accosted by a hyper militant guy of the empire who's trying to like commandeer the Foundation and their resources. And the guy like raises his gun at Salvor Hardin, who's an unarmed politician at this time, and he says, "Violence is the last refuge of the incompetent." And it's the greatest moment. It's a really awesome, badass moment. But anyway, I've wanted this my whole life, and I'm afraid it's going to suck because I don't really love the trailers. The trailers don't do a great job of this, and I think they're going to fuck it up. But it's if people always say the right way to do something is to give it that massive Netflix show, HBO treatment, right? Like everyone always says this about like Warcraft, for instance. They're like, "Oh, Warcraft would make an excellent They should do the Arthas story as an HBO show. They should do The Last of Us as an HBO show," which is a thing. They're doing The Last of Us as an HBO show or whatever, right? So that's what they're doing on Apple Plus. It's probably the correct thing to do, but we'll see if they can pull it off. Take like 9 pages of prologue and stretch it across the entirety of the first season of the show, I guess. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I mean, in a very, very similar vein, right? Like, I have just finished God Emperor of Dune, um, which is not if the reports to be believed, the movie is just going to cover the first half of the first book, so
Okay.
which makes sense, right? Like a movie, I feel like you could do the first half of Dune and be fine, um, but like like I think I said this the last time I talked about it, but I think God Emperor of Dune is the book um that Frank Herbert wanted to write, and you to write 3 books of justification to get there to understand what Leto 2 is doing.
Sure.
Also has some pretty choice quotes, like the one that has just been echoing in my head is it's every rebel is a closeted aristocrat or a closet aristocrat. Um, and there's like a twin quote which is like and I'm gonna screw this up. It's like scratch conservative and find someone who's afraid of change. Scratch liberal and find a closet aristocrat. It's like a very weirdly political book. Also, like I don't know how the politics like. There's some retrograde stuff in there as you might expect, right? Like there's some weirdly like I'm gonna call it retrofuturistic views on like homosexuality. In that like the character like there's like a character who's like this is wrong, and there's another character who's like no, it's fine because it allows like allows soldiers to offlet their like violence or something, right? It's
Whoa.
like it's good, but for the wrong reasons, which is like okay, that's
Yeah, I
interesting.
love that. That's something that people commented about when it came to Game of Thrones, right? Where because Game of Thrones is set in this like repressive medieval society, it gets to simultaneously engage in the sort of, harsh reality of oppression, right? Like oppressing a homosexual person, but also the taboo of being homosexual in this repressive society or whatever. And so yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah,
That's weird.
it's interesting because like Leto has these like long screeds on like why people are the way they are, and like I think part of this is why you needed 3 books to build up to it, because like
Mhm.
Leto is basically like a hyper autocratic fascist with like very long ranging goals. That like the book kind of portrays as being like it's hard to it's hard to sympathize with Leto, but like he's kind of the hero, and it's also kind of hard to sympathize with his you know great grandniece, who is like another part of she's like opposed to him, and like still also like it
Okay.
would not make sense from like just a straight reading point of view, right? Like
Well, fuck.
yeah, it's good. It's good. The only other thing is I started reading To the Bridge, which is a very real story. It's a piece of it's basically a story report, like it's like a reporting on like a real thing that happened it's Nancy Rommelman's book about a mother who threw her kids off a bridge in Portland, Oregon, and one of them died, and the other ones managed to survive. And it's examination of the circumstances that led to that happening, and it is incredibly sad. Um, and
Fuck.
yeah, um,
Okay.
yeah, very
Well, all
heavy.
right then.
But it's well written. I'm a fan of Nancy Rommelman's outside of this, which is why I started reading it. Um, but yeah, if you're interested in that kind of thing, um, I like it is sad, but it's not sad on the scale of like Dear Zachary, which is like
Yeah.
which is my touchstone for like things that I only watch if I'm in a particular mood. Um, and I haven't watched that movie since the first time I watched it.
And I've never been in that mood again.
Yeah. Um, but to the bridges is at the very least interesting. So I could recommend it on those grounds. Um, uh, but we talked mostly about my week. But how's your week been besides Greyhound
God.
and Ted Lasso?
Yeah, it's been honestly the hardest part of my week is finding something to do when I want to watch something because I always want to have something occupying my hands. It's hard for me to like sit and like watch a thing outside of a movie theater these days. But I have been more or less like off WoW, right? Like I don't want to say I have like some quarrels with the idea of being burned out on WoW. I just feel like I have diminished like my WoW playing has sort of like diminished in recent weeks. So I don't want to play WoW. I do want to play Hearthstone. But I specifically have been waiting for the Mercenaries update, which is this like it's a little bit of a gotcha, but it's kind of like it's sort of like those mobile games where it's like you could play as Qui-Gon or you could play as whatever, but it's just like you're playing as fucking Arthas and Karen Bloodhoof or whatever. But after an initial reveal that was honestly bafflingly hard to comprehend, I actually really like Mercenaries. Mercenaries looks super fun. I have watched the Hearthstone streamer Trump play a bunch of Mercenaries, and I'm like, this looks like a ton of fun just to like sit and mindlessly grind while I'm, watching an episode of like Ted Lasso or whatever. And then the other thing I've been doing is playing a ton of Vermintide too. I don't know why we like really got into Vermintide after we were into it like a little bit, but now it's like every night like somebody pings that group chat and it's like, hey guys, you want to fucking kill some rats? It's like, yeah, dude. And honestly, it's been pretty great. Like integrating into the deeper Vermintide sort of like ecosystem. Has been a lot of fun, especially because I'm sort of doing the thing that I did with HOTS, where like I'm ignoring I'm just sort of playing what I think is fun. I don't really have a good sense of what is good gear and what is bad gear. Like I'm getting gear all the time. Every time you complete a map, you get a chest, and that chest includes some gear, and it has a number. Sometimes that number is bigger than your other number. Do you equip it? Sure, why not? Who cares, right? Like that kind of a thing. We have recently got into sort of their version of it's funny. I almost think that the Vermintide devs it's like they're copying WoW. They have a version of Vermintide that's like Mythic Plus called Deeds, where you get these things and they have affixes on them, and you play a regular mission, but it has these affixes on them, right? They have a thing that's like basically Torghast that they released earlier this year called Chaos Wastes, which is a roguelike mode where you're stripped of all of your power, right? You just walk in with weapons and you're getting this currency, and you find these little upgrade stations, and you upgrade and you get a better weapon, and it gives you little you get these little anima power things or whatever they're called, right? And you move through the map. It is better than Torghast for a couple of reasons I could go in depth on later, or maybe on another podcast, I guess. And they have this other thing called the Weave, which is also like Mythic Plus because it scales up numerically, right? Like you start at level 1 and you have a level 1 challenge game, and then you get and then you beat that, you unlock level 2, you beat that, you unlock level 3, you beat that, you unlock level 4, and you just walk your way up these levels or whatever. And it's like every time we turn a corner there's some new mechanic or game mode or something that's like, oh, oh fuck, this is a lot of fun. This is super fun. I'm really into it. Um, the Weave basically has artifact weapons. Because every time you do a match of the Weave, you get a little bit of essence, and then you pump your essence into your weapons, and then your weapons do, like this or that or whatever. And it's just like it's a whole thing, but it's a good time. And it's been fun. So I don't
Sounds
know.
like it. Yeah. All right. Well, if you don't have anything else, I'll close this out then.
I don't have anything else.
All right. Well, if you'd like to email us what you think about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, whether it's WoW or Dear Evan Hansen or Ted Lasso, you can email us at somedisplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@somedisplaygames.com. You can follow us on twitch.tv/somedisplaygames where these go live, and you can you can comment in the audience if you still feel like it. We've got a Patreon, we've got a YouTube, we've got all sorts of everything. I think that's everything I have. Buddy, you have anything you want to promote?
I have nothing that I'm looking to promote.
Well, in that case, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.